Let's dive into number 10, the Zanclean Flood. It was roughly 5.33 million years ago, long before any flicker of human civilization. A geological event of unimaginable scale played out when the Atlantic Ocean absolutely devoured an entire sea. The Mediterranean, as we know it, simply vanished. Not reduced, not merely dried out, but truly gone, erased from the Earth's surface. This cataclysm, known as the Messinian Salinity Crisis, had sealed off the Strait of Gibraltar. This act severed the mighty Mediterranean basin from the vast Atlantic Ocean. Over countless millennia, hundreds of thousands of years, the relentless forces of evaporation did their work. The water receded, then disappeared entirely, leaving behind an immense barren desert basin that stretched from what is now modern-day Spain all the way to the distant shores of Lebanon. The floor of this colossal chasm became carpeted with salt deposits hundreds of meters thick. Deeper still, in sections plunging nearly 5 kilometers below the surrounding continental shelves, temperatures soared to extremes completely incompatible with any complex life. This was no longer a sea, it was an abyss, a truly alien landscape. Then, the inconceivable happened. The barrier broke. In 1973, two pioneering geologists, Kenneth Hutsu and William Ryan, aboard the research vessel Glomar Challenger, drilled deep into the Mediterranean seabed. What they pulled up from that depth shouldn't have existed. Layers of evaporated minerals, the kind that only form when vast bodies of water completely dry up, buried beneath hundreds of meters of marine sediment. The implications were stunning, undeniable. The entire Mediterranean had indeed dried out and then refilled. Subsequent groundbreaking research by Daniel Garcia Castanos, published in Nature in 2009, meticulously modeled exactly how this refilling occurred. The Atlantic Ocean, with unimaginable force, breached the land bridge at Gibraltar. Water didn't just begin to trickle through, it poured, a surging cascade that would make every single flood in recorded human history look like a mere dripping faucet. The sheer numbers almost defy comprehension. At its terrifying peak, an estimated 100 million cubic meters of water surged through that breach every single second. To put that into perspective, it's 1,000 times the discharge of the mighty Amazon River. The entire Mediterranean basin, covering a staggering 2.5 million square kilometers, filled in a period estimated to be as short as several months and no longer than 2 years. Sea levels in the deepest sections rose at rates exceeding 10 meters per day. A waterfall wider than the entire English Channel itself thundered from the Atlantic shelf into the empty basin, carving a channel with such immense force that it remains visible on the seafloor to this very day. What makes this event particularly chilling isn't just its unbelievable scale, although that scale is almost incomprehensible to the human mind. No, what truly unsettles is what it erased. Whatever ecosystems had managed to colonize that vast dry basin over hundreds of thousands of years, whatever unique evolutionary experiments were unfolding in that alien world of salt flats and extreme heat, all of it was annihilated in mere geological moments. An entire world drowned beneath kilometers of ocean water. No human eyes witnessed the Zanclean Flood. Our ancestors wouldn't even walk upright for another 2 million years. Yet, this monumental event profoundly shaped the very geography that would eventually define human civilization. The Mediterranean Sea, which would later cradle the Phoenicians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Egyptians, and every other coastal culture of the ancient world, all of it exists because a rocky barrier failed a little over 5 million years ago, and an entire ocean fell into a hole. The very coastlines where the first cities would later rise, the critical shipping lanes that would carry trade across the ancient world, the rich fishing grounds that would feed empires, all of this was forged in a flood so violent that it reshaped the geography of an entire continent within months. The world we inherited was literally built on a catastrophe so immense that our species arrived millions of years too late to even begin to comprehend the sheer scale of what had been destroyed. Now for number 9, the Toba supervolcano and humanity's near extinction. Approximately 74,000 years ago, on the island of Sumatra in modern-day Indonesia, the Earth itself detonated. The Toba supervolcano unleashed an eruption rated 8 on the Volcanic Explosivity Index, the absolute highest classification possible. To grasp the terror of this, consider the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens, which barely registered a 5 on the same scale. Each subsequent number on this index represents a 10-fold increase in the sheer volume of ejected material. This means Toba was an astonishing 1,000 times more powerful than the eruption that flattened 600 square kilometers of Pacific Northwest forest. This cataclysmic eruption blasted an estimated 2,800 cubic kilometers of material straight into the atmosphere. The resulting caldera, now submerged beneath Lake Toba, stretches an astounding 100 kilometers long and 30 kilometers wide. It remains the largest volcanic lake on Earth, a scar so massive it's unmistakably visible from orbit. The ash from this cataclysmic eruption has been discovered in sediment cores spanning the Indian Ocean, the South China Sea, and even as far west as Lake Malawi in eastern Africa, over 7,000 kilometers from the initial blast site. Layers of Toba ash reaching up to 15 centimeters thick have been identified in Indian soil deposits, effectively blanketing the subcontinent in a suffocating layer of volcanic debris. This destructive fallout would have choked vegetation and poisoned water sources across hundreds of thousands of square kilometers. But the sheer scale of the crater and the widespread ash were merely the initial signs of devastation. The truly terrifying destruction stemmed from what the eruption hurled into the sky. In 1998, anthropologist Stanley Ambrose from the University of Illinois published a groundbreaking paper. This research expertly linked Toba to a puzzling phenomenon geneticists had been grappling with for years. Human genetic diversity is astonishingly low when compared to other species. To illustrate, chimpanzees inhabiting even a single forest in Central Africa possess more genetic variation than the entire 8 billion-strong human population. This suggested that something had, at some point in our distant past, reduced our species to an extraordinarily small breeding population. Ambrose's bold proposition was that Toba was precisely that cause. The eruption forcefully injected billions of tons of sulfur dioxide and ash directly into the stratosphere, causing the sun's light to dim dramatically. Global temperatures plummeted by an estimated 3 to 5 degrees Celsius for several years. Some scientific models even suggest a volcanic winter that persisted for a decade or more, leading to regional cooling of up to 15 degrees in higher latitudes. Vegetation withered and died, food chains disintegrated, and the crucial growing seasons that sustained early human populations vanished beneath skies choked with ash. What makes this theory particularly unsettling is the population estimate. Genetic evidence indicates that the total human breeding population might have dwindled to a terrifyingly small range, between 3,000 and 10,000 individuals. This wasn't 3,000 people in one isolated region. It was 3,000 total, across the entire planet. Every human being alive today potentially descends from a group so small it could have fit into a single sports stadium. Our species didn't just endure hardship, we teetered on the brink of extinction. The margin between humanity's ultimate survival and its complete annihilation was thinner than the population of a small town. While some researchers dispute the extreme severity of this bottleneck, and archaeological evidence from sites in Africa and India shows certain human populations persisted through the eruption without obvious disruption, the debate continues fiercely in academic journals and conferences. Yet, what remains indisputable is the eruption itself, its immense magnitude, and the undeniable fact that something drastically reduced human genetic diversity to levels suggesting a catastrophic population crash precisely within the time frame of Toba's eruption. Coincidence is always a possibility, but the striking alignment between the largest volcanic event in 2 million years and the most severe genetic bottleneck in human history demands more than a simple dismissal. Consider the profound implications. If the winds had shifted just slightly differently, if the eruption had been only marginally larger, if those few thousand survivors had been even slightly less fortunate, every human being who has ever lived since that point, every civilization, every language, every monumental achievement, none of it would have existed. The entire trajectory of human history precariously balanced on whether a few thousand early humans could survive in a sky that had turned to poison. Our next journey takes us to number 8, the flooding of Doggerland, the lost civilization beneath the North Sea. In 1931, a British fishing trawler named the Kinda was hauling its nets from the North Sea, specifically between England and Denmark, when its crew discovered something utterly out of place. Tangled among the fish and seaweed was a peculiar lump of peat, and embedded within it was a barbed antler point, a tool clearly shaped by human hands. This remarkable artifact had been dredged from the seafloor 40 meters below the surface of the open ocean. Prior to this, archaeologist Clement Reid had theorized in 1913 that a landmass once connected Britain to continental Europe. However, the Kinda's incredible discovery provided indisputable physical proof. Humans had indeed lived on land that was now submerged beneath the waves. That enigmatic land is known as Doggerland. During the last glacial maximum, approximately 20,000 years ago, global sea levels were an astonishing 120 meters lower than they are today. The North Sea basin, once a vast expanse of dry land, stretched from eastern England across to the Netherlands, Denmark, and even further. This wasn't some desolate wasteland. It was incredibly fertile ground, a highly desirable landscape. This ancient land was a vibrant tapestry of marshes, dense forests, winding river valleys, and diverse coastlines, all teeming with wildlife. Mighty mammoths, powerful aurochs, agile red deer, and wild horses roamed freely across these plains, while abundant fish filled its rivers. For thousands of years, thriving Mesolithic hunter-gatherer communities made their homes here. Recent seismic surveys and sediment core analysis have started to reveal the true magnitude of what was lost. In 2007, marine archaeologist Vince Gaffney, working at the University of Birmingham, utilized oil industry survey data to meticulously reconstruct Doggerland's topography with astonishing detail. His team uncovered and mapped entire river systems, lakes, coastlines, and even hills hidden beneath the bed of the North Sea. The astounding landscape that emerged was larger than many modern European nations, a territory roughly the size of modern Britain itself, now completely submerged beneath the waves. Subsequent discoveries have only painted an even richer, deeper picture. Fishing and dredging operations have hauled up mammoth bones, meticulously crafted flint tools, and even a fragment of a Neanderthal skull from the seafloor. In 2019, researchers incredibly recovered a hand axe, an ancient tool dating back approximately 50,000 years, from sediment dredged up from the bottom of the North Sea. This shows Doggerland wasn't merely occupied in the final millennia before its complete inundation. It had been inhabited on and off for tens of thousands of years by multiple human species. Between approximately 6,500 and 6,200 BC, rising global temperatures, marking the end of the last great ice age, caused the remaining colossal ice sheets across Scandinavia and northern Europe to melt. Steadily, relentlessly, sea levels began to climb, swallowing Doggerland from its outermost edges inward. Communities that had lived on these lowlands for countless millennia watched their world literally shrink, generation by generation. Familiar coastlines retreated further and further inland. Once rich hunting grounds were inundated. River valleys, lifelines of these communities, transformed into vast estuaries, then gradually became open sea. Entire networks of settlements, the very pathways connecting them, sacred burial grounds, and revered sites, all of it slowly slipped beneath the advancing water. What makes the eventual flooding of Doggerland particularly haunting is its chilling completeness. This wasn't a single cataclysmic event. It was a long, protracted drowning that unfolded over many centuries. This slow, inexorable process was punctuated by sudden, terrifying surges as massive ice dams broke apart and enormous pulses of meltwater roared into the ocean. The people of Doggerland didn't perish in one dramatic moment. Instead, they continually retreated, adapted, relocated their lives, and then retreated again as their homeland vanished, meter by agonizing meter. Some managed to reach higher ground, areas that would eventually become Britain or Scandinavia. Many others, however, simply did not. Their settlements, their precious tools, their ancestors' burial sites, all of it now lies silently beneath 40 meters of cold, dark North Sea water, largely inaccessible and tantalizingly unexcavated. The exact number of people displaced by Doggerland's relentless submersion is impossible to calculate precisely, but at its maximum extent, this vast territory could have comfortably supported tens of thousands of Mesolithic inhabitants. The entire history of a civilization, potentially spanning 5,000 years of continuous human habitation, was utterly erased by the rising waters. We know they existed because their tools still occasionally wash up in fishing nets, providing faint echoes from the past. But beyond these fragments, we know almost nothing else. Their intricate stories, their unique languages, their profound understanding of the world they called home, all are irrevocably lost. Doggerland isn't lost because we forgot it. It's lost because the ocean physically consumed every single trace of the people who once called it home. Number 7. The 8.2 kilo-year event. When the Ice Age returned for one final devastating assault approximately 8,200 years ago, the very last remnants of the great North American ice sheet made one final desperate attempt to reshape the world. This wasn't through a grinding glacial advance or a slow continental freeze, but through a single, catastrophic release of water so immense that it violently disrupted the planet's intricate climate systems for over a century. In 1960, geologist Wallace Broecker, working at Columbia University, began his groundbreaking studies into ocean circulation patterns, and in doing so, he discovered something that would forever redefine our understanding of climate stability. The Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, that immense conveyor belt of ocean currents responsible for carrying warm waters northward and keeping Europe in a temperate climate, faced an existential threat. It wasn't a gradual shutdown over millennia that loomed, but a rapid, almost instantaneous cessation within mere decades, possibly even years. The culprit? Nothing less than fresh water. Massive, unprecedented influxes of fresh water pouring into the North Atlantic could dilute the dense, salty water that powers this global circulation. Such a dilution, if drastic enough, would effectively switch off the entire system. Around 6,200 years before the Common Era, this terrifying mechanism jolted into action. Two colossal glacial lakes, Lake Agassiz and Lake Ojibwe, had been swelling for thousands of years, held back by an immense ice dam in what is now central Canada. These were no ordinary bodies of water. Lake Agassiz alone sprawled across an area larger than all the modern Great Lakes combined, holding an estimated 163,000 cubic kilometers of pure fresh water. When the ice dam finally gave way, this unimaginable volume of water, roughly half the amount found in the modern Great Lakes, surged into the Labrador Sea in what geologists call a mere geological instant. Some estimates suggest this massive drainage occurred within a single year. Others propose it unfolded in a matter of weeks. The repercussions were immediate and utterly devastating. This colossal freshwater pulse sabotaged the Atlantic circulation system precisely as Broecker's models had predicted. The warm currents that had previously rendered northern Europe habitable withered dramatically. Global temperatures plummeted by an average of 1 to 3 degrees Celsius. In the North Atlantic region, the cold snap was far more severe, with temperatures diving by as much as 5 degrees in some localized areas. Winters intensified, gripping the land with an unprecedented chill. Growing seasons vital for food production shrank by weeks, throwing communities into disarray. Precipitation patterns across entire continents shifted capriciously, further compounding the crisis. What makes the 8.2 kiloyear event particularly chilling is its timing. This wasn't the depths of the last ice age, when humans existed as scattered bands of nomadic hunters, already hardened by extreme cold. No, this was the dawn of the Neolithic era. Humanity had just begun its grand experiment with farming. Communities in the Fertile Crescent, the Levant, and southeastern Europe had painstakingly built their entire existence around agriculture, planting crops that demanded predictable seasons and stable temperatures. They had committed their very survival to a way of life that hinged on climate consistency. Then, the climate broke. Archaeological evidence from across the Near East tells a stark story of sudden settlement abandonments, agonizing reversals from farming back to pastoral herding, and desperate migrations away from marginal agricultural zones. In the Levant, sites that had been continuously inhabited for generations suddenly showed distinct disruption layers, perfectly coinciding with the 8.2 kiloyear event. Along the Atlantic coast, European Neolithic communities faced an agonizing resource collapse as marine ecosystems shifted dramatically and terrestrial food sources became critically scarce. Ice cores extracted from Greenland unequivocally confirm the severity of this period. The cold snap registers as a sharp, unmistakable signal within the oxygen isotope record. A sudden, precipitous plunge lasting approximately 160 years before temperatures slowly, painstakingly began to recover. But the most disturbing implication isn't simply what the 8.2 kiloyear event destroyed. It's the profound, uncomfortable truth it revealed. Climate stability is not a given. It is a temporary, fragile condition, one that can be catastrophically disrupted by a single, immense geological event. The entire framework of human civilization, every city, every meticulously planned agricultural system, every economy, depends on the unspoken assumption that tomorrow's climate will mirror today's. 8,200 years ago, an ice dam burst in Canada, and farming communities a continent away withered and starved. The fledgling infrastructure of early civilization proved as heartbreakingly fragile as the very ice that had once held back the flood. Next, we journey to what is known as the Storegga Slide, the wall of water that briefly erased a world. On October 28, 2014, a team of marine geologists led by Peter Talling at the National Oceanography Center in Southampton unveiled findings that precisely quantified one of the most powerful tsunami events ever recorded in the geological history of the North Atlantic. Approximately 8,150 years ago, a massive section of the Norwegian continental shelf, an area roughly the size of Scotland itself, shockingly detached from the seabed and plunged into the crushing depths of the ocean. This cataclysmic event, forever etched into geological records as the Storegga Slide, displaced an astonishing 3,500 cubic kilometers of sediment, making it one of the largest known submarine landslides in Earth's entire history. The sheer volume of material that shifted was equivalent to an unimaginably vast block of Earth, 300 kilometers long, 50 kilometers wide, and several hundred meters thick, all of it collapsing into the Norwegian Sea in mere minutes. The resulting tsunami was unlike anything ever recorded in human history. Waves reached estimated heights of 25 meters along the coast of Norway. The Shetland Islands, directly in the tsunami's devastating path, were struck by towering walls of water that geologists have meticulously traced through sediment deposits found a remarkable 80 meters above modern sea level on some of the islands. The eastern coast of Scotland was not spared, receiving waves estimated at 20 meters or even higher. Traces of sand from the Storegga tsunami have been identified as far inland as 80 kilometers from the current Scottish coastline, carried there by water that simply shouldn't have reached that far from the sea. But the most utterly devastating impact of this cataclysmic event was felt in a place that no longer exists on any contemporary map. Doggerland, already significantly diminished by thousands of years of steadily rising sea levels, had been reduced to a low-lying archipelago of scattered islands and marshland by approximately 6,200 BC. The Mesolithic communities, still desperately clinging to these last remnants of their once vast homeland, were among the most vulnerable populations on Earth. They existed at an extremely low elevation, with no high ground to flee to, surrounded on all sides by the very sea that had been relentlessly consuming their world for generations. When the Storegga wave finally reached Doggerland, the effect was absolute. 20-meter waves sweeping across a landscape that barely rose above sea level left nothing in their wake. The archaeological evidence tells a stark story. Whatever remained of human habitation on the Doggerland remnants after approximately 6,200 BC effectively vanishes from the historical record. The Storegga tsunami didn't merely flood a coastline. It delivered the killing blow to an already dying landmass, erasing its final inhabitants in a single, horrific event. What makes the Storegga Slide particularly unsettling is its utter invisibility until the moment it struck. Submarine landslides occur without any surface warning whatsoever. No earthquake of any perceptible magnitude preceded the slide that anyone on land could have felt. The ocean floor simply gave way, and mere minutes later, unforgiving walls of water were traveling across the North Sea at speeds approaching 500 kilometers per hour. The communities of Mesolithic Scotland, Norway, and the few remaining inhabitants of Doggerland had no concept of what was coming. They possessed no framework for understanding why the sea had suddenly risen 20 meters and was now racing inland at such an impossible speed. The Storegga Slide wasn't the only submarine landslide in this region's geological history, and gravely, it certainly won't be the last. The Norwegian continental margin remains geologically active. Sediment continues to accumulate perilously on slopes that have utterly collapsed before. The critical question isn't whether another submarine landslide will occur in the North Atlantic. It is undeniably when. And the populations thriving along those coastlines today number not in the thousands, but in the tens of millions. The Mesolithic communities destroyed by the Storegga wave had no warning and no understanding of the immense threat lurking beneath their ocean. In that chilling respect, remarkably little has truly changed. Number 5. The Black Sea Deluge, when the ocean swallowed an entire civilization whole. In 1997, marine geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman at Columbia University's Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory published a groundbreaking hypothesis that would connect ancient geology to humanity's oldest and most enduring stories. Using advanced sonar mapping and sediment cores carefully extracted from the floor of the Black Sea, they proposed that approximately 7,600 years ago, the mighty Mediterranean Sea breached the natural land barrier at the Bosphorus Strait and unleashed a torrential flow into what had been a freshwater lake, sitting far below modern sea level. The resulting flood was catastrophic, incredibly rapid, and utterly devastating to the farming communities that had settled along the lake's once fertile shores. Ryan and Pittman provocatively suggested that this immense event might very well be the historical basis for the numerous flood narratives found across the ancient Near East, including the Epic of Gilgamesh and the biblical story of Noah's Ark. The evidence beneath the Black Sea is strikingly profound. Sonar surveys have revealed ancient shorelines submerged a staggering 150 meters below the current surface. Sediment cores show an abrupt, undeniable transition from freshwater deposits to marine sediments. A geological boundary so incredibly sharp it suggests the change happened, in geological terms, almost overnight. Below that very boundary, you find freshwater mollusks. Above those ancient freshwater mollusks, saltwater species burst into existence, appearing suddenly and completely. Something monumental transformed the Black Sea from a freshwater lake to a saltwater body in a blink of geological time, far too brief for any gradual shift. Scientists Ryan and Pittman's models projected the flood's sheer power, an intensity roughly 200 times the flow rate of Niagara Falls. Saltwater didn't just seep, it cascaded through the Bosphorus Channel with such immense force that it carved out a gorge still clearly visible in modern bathymetric surveys. The lake's surface surged upward by as much as 15 centimeters every single day. Along the flat northern stretches of the basin, the shorelines receded by over a kilometer daily. Within a mere few months, an area roughly the size of Ireland was swallowed by the encroaching sea. Imagine the horror. Farming communities who had tilled the rich lakefront soil for generations watched in disbelief as the water relentlessly advanced toward their crop fields, their family homes, their ancestral burial grounds. There was no way to halt its relentless progress and nowhere safe along the ever-shrinking shore to retreat to. What renders the Black Sea deluge particularly eerie is its chilling archaeological silence. We know for certain that people thrived along those shores. The fertile lowlands hugging a freshwater lake in a semi-arid region would have been prime settlement territory during the early Neolithic era. Communities in the broader region already cultivated wheat, barley, and lentils, raised livestock, and built robust, permanent structures. This lakeside would have supported some of the most productive farmland in the entire ancient Near East. Yet, any archaeological record from these settlements lies buried under 150 meters of saltwater, effectively rendered inaccessible. In the year 2000, the renowned underwater explorer Robert Ballard, famous for discovering the wreck of the Titanic, led expeditions to the Black Sea floor. He reported finding compelling evidence of ancient shorelines and even possible man-made structures miraculously preserved in the anoxic deep water. The Black Sea's unique chemistry, where its deep layers contain almost no dissolved oxygen, means that organic material on the seafloor doesn't decompose as it normally would. Wooden structures and biological remains that would have utterly disintegrated millennia ago in any other body of water might still exist in the perpetual darkness 150 meters down, perfectly preserved, yet beyond any practical excavation. The debate over the Black Sea deluge's speed and immense scale continues amongst geologists. Some argue the flooding was more gradual, unfolding over thousands of years rather than a few short months. But what remains absolutely undisputed is the fundamental event itself. The Black Sea was once a smaller, lower freshwater body. It emphatically became a larger, higher saltwater sea. People undeniably lived on the shores now submerged, and the chilling cultural memory of a catastrophic flood persists across every single civilization that emerged in the surrounding region. Whatever those communities built, whatever they believed, whatever they understood about their world, the water took it all. This brings us to number 4, the catastrophic collapse of Lake Megachad. In 2006, a team of researchers led by geologist Matteo Schuster at the University of Strasbourg published groundbreaking findings from satellite imagery and field surveys across the southern Sahara. This research confirmed what geologists had suspected for decades. The largest desert on Earth was once green. Not marginally vegetated, not merely dotted with scattered oases, but truly green, carpeted in grasslands, ancient forests, and flowing rivers. And at its very heart, a body of fresh water so vast it dwarfed any lake existing on the planet today. Lake Megachad, at its maximum extent roughly 7,000 years ago, covered an estimated 400,000 square kilometers. That's larger than even the modern Caspian Sea, larger than Germany itself, a freshwater inland sea stretching across what is now some of the most barren, uninhabitable terrain on Earth. The undeniable evidence is written directly into the landscape itself. Satellite imagery reveals ancient shorelines and lake sediment deposits hundreds of kilometers from the nearest modern water source. Fossilized pollen samples show grassland and woodland species that now thrive only in tropical Central Africa. Rock art in the Tassili Naja Plateau of southern Algeria, first documented by French explorer Henri Lotte in 1956, depicts vibrant scenes of hippos, crocodiles, towering giraffes, and cattle herders, all set in landscapes that are now nothing but parched, waterless sand. People didn't just pass through the Sahara, they lived there. They farmed there. They built thriving communities around a lake as vast as a small ocean. But between approximately 5000 and 3000 BC, this world began its grim collapse. The Earth's axial tilt and its orbital precession slowly, inexorably, shifted the position of the West African monsoon, that vital seasonal rain belt that had nourished the Green Sahara for millennia. As the monsoon retreated southwards, rainfall tragically dwindled. Suddenly, the colossal Lake Megachad began to recede. The lush grasslands withered. The mighty rivers dried into mere seasonal trickles until they vanished completely, swallowed by the parched earth. Climate models paint a stark picture. This transition involved dramatic tipping points. Even slight decreases in rainfall triggered a disproportionate loss of vegetation. This, in turn, crippled the moisture recycling process, reducing rainfall even further and creating a devastating feedback loop. This accelerated the drying far beyond what orbital shifts alone could have predicted. What makes the demise of Lake Megachad truly unsettling is its breathtaking speed in geological terms. Core samples from Lake Yoa in northern Chad, meticulously analyzed and published by Stefan Kropelin in the journal Science in 2008, indicate that the transformation from a green, vibrant Sahara to a barren desert took place in a mere 1,000 to 2,000 years. For the human communities caught in its grip, this was a slow, agonizing strangulation. Each successive generation inherited a world just slightly drier, marginally harsher, and incrementally less habitable than the one before it. Fishing communities, once thriving along Lake Megachad's retreating shores, watched in despair as the water steadily pulled back year after year, revealing vast mudflats that baked into cracked earth, eventually transforming into endless stretches of sand. The migration sparked by this monumental collapse may have profoundly shaped the very foundations of recorded history. As the Sahara withered, populations desperately converged along the remaining water sources, particularly the fertile Nile Valley. Some archaeologists, including Fakhri Hassan from University College London, have compellingly proposed that this influx of Saharan refugees into the Nile corridor provided the critical population density and sophisticated agricultural knowledge that catalyzed the astonishing emergence of Egyptian civilization. The powerful pyramids, the revered pharaohs, the intricate hieroglyphs, indeed, the entire enduring cultural legacy of ancient Egypt may owe their existence to a lake larger than Germany that evaporated, compelling its inhabitants to cluster along the only river that still flowed with life. The Sahara didn't perish in a single cataclysmic event. It slowly withered from the gradual withdrawal of the very conditions that sustained it. And the millions of people who called it home didn't vanish in an instant of destruction. They walked away, generation by painstaking generation, carrying whatever precious few possessions they could towards any water that still existed. Behind them, the greatest freshwater lake the world had ever witnessed shrank to a mere ghost of its former self. Modern Lake Chad covers barely 1,500 square kilometers. The ancient sweeping shorelines of its magnificent predecessor now stretch across a desert that tragically remembers nothing of the vibrant world it once was. Next, number 3, the Thera eruption, charting the destructive end of the first great European civilization. In 1967, the visionary archaeologist Spiridon Marinatos embarked on excavations at Akrotiri, nestled on the southern tip of the Greek island of Santorini. What he unearthed beneath meters of solidified volcanic ash was nothing short of extraordinary. A complete Bronze Age city, preserved with chilling perfection, much like Pompeii. It boasted multi-story buildings, highly sophisticated drainage systems, and breathtaking frescoes of astonishing artistic mastery. This ancient city had been dramatically frozen in time by a volcanic eruption so unimaginably powerful it utterly reshaped the geography of the eastern Mediterranean. Approximately 3,600 years ago, the very volcano that sculpted Santorini, known to geologists as Thera, erupted in one of the most violent bursts of the last 10,000 years. The eruption blasted out an estimated 60 cubic kilometers of material, a volume 4 times greater than that ejected by Krakatoa in 1883. This monumental explosion caused the center of the entire island to collapse into the sea, forging the distinctive caldera that defines Santorini's iconic crescent shape today. The volcanic explosivity index rates the Thera eruption at a staggering 7, placing it firmly among the most potent volcanic events ever recorded in geological history. Ash deposits from this cataclysm have been definitively identified in sediment cores from the distant Nile Delta, the deep eastern Mediterranean seabed, and even in ice cores extracted from Greenland over 4,000 kilometers away. The immediate, terrifying blast obliterated all island settlements. Akrotiri miraculously shows no human remains, powerfully suggesting that its population had successfully evacuated before the final cataclysmic event. Preliminary seismic tremors likely provided a crucial, albeit brief, warning, hinting at the impending cataclysm. Yet even a successful evacuation from the island of Thera offered no guarantee of survival for its inhabitants. The monumental eruption unleashed tsunamis that surged outwards, radiating devastation across the entire eastern Mediterranean. While precise wave height estimations vary among experts, sophisticated models developed by the renowned tsunami geologist Kostas Sinolakis indicate that colossal waves, ranging from 9 to 15 meters high, slammed into the northern coast of Crete. This happened within 30 minutes of the caldera's collapse, impacting an island located a mere 110 kilometers to the south. Crete was then the vibrant heart of the Minoan civilization, recognized as the very first advanced civilization to emerge in European history. The Minoans had constructed magnificent palace complexes at Knossos, Phaistos, Malea, and Zakros. They boasted a sophisticated written language, maintained intricate trade networks that stretched across the complete expanse of the eastern Mediterranean, and produced art of such unparalleled beauty and complexity that it wouldn't be rivaled in Europe for another 1,000 years. Archaeological findings along the northern Cretan coast vividly display layers of destruction entirely consistent with the devastating impact of a massive tsunami. Harbor infrastructure was utterly obliterated. Coastal settlements were reduced to ruins. Most tragically, the powerful Minoan fleet, the very bedrock of their economic strength and military dominance, was likely crippled, if not entirely destroyed, in a single catastrophic afternoon. But what makes the Thera eruption particularly terrifying is not just the immediate destruction, but the profound long-term consequences that followed. The eruption propelled immense quantities of sulfur dioxide high into the stratosphere, forming an aerosol layer that dramatically cooled regional temperatures. Evidence from tree rings, specifically ancient oaks in Ireland, resilient bristlecone pines in California, and subfossil trees discovered in Sweden, reveals a distinctly abnormal growth pattern in the middle of the second millennium BC, precisely consistent with the cooling effects of such a massive volcanic event. For a civilization already grappling with the crippling aftermath of tsunami devastation, the ensuing years of drastically diminished harvests likely delivered the final, fatal blow from which the Minoans would never truly recover. Indeed, within a single generation following the eruption, Minoan civilization entered an irreversible and steep decline. Mycenaean Greeks venturing from the mainland began to establish control on Crete. The unique Minoan language slowly faded into oblivion. Their once grand palace complexes were either repurposed by new occupants or simply abandoned to decay. A civilization that had flourished brilliantly for over a millennium was, within a relatively short period, absorbed and ultimately supplanted by a culture that had been subordinate to it just a few decades earlier. Some scholars, starting with K.T. Frost in 1909, have compellingly argued that the utter destruction of Thera and its aftermath provided the historical bedrock for Plato's legendary account of Atlantis, a powerful island civilization consumed by catastrophe and swallowed by the relentless sea. Whether or not Atlantis was the Minoan civilization, the parallel remains strikingly precise. An advanced island culture, at the zenith of its power, suddenly erased by forces erupting from beneath the very earth upon which it stood. Shifting our focus, we arrive at the second monumental event, the Younger Dryas Impact, a cataclysmic moment when a comet fundamentally reshaped the Ice Age world. In 2007, nuclear physicist Richard Firestone, along with a dedicated team of 25 researchers, published a groundbreaking paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, proposing something truly extraordinary. Approximately 12,800 years ago, at the precise juncture when Earth was just beginning to emerge from the grasp of its last great ice age, something immense struck our planet. A comet or perhaps an asteroid, potentially fracturing into multiple pieces upon entering the atmosphere, detonated with immense force over the vast Laurentide ice sheet that covered much of North America. The resulting massive airburst unleashed a devastating cascade of destruction, plunging the entire planet back into intense ice age conditions for more than 1,000 years. This dramatic period is now known as the Younger Dryas, and its sudden onset represents one of the most abrupt and severe climate reversals ever recorded in geological history. The irrefutable evidence of this event is meticulously preserved within a thin, distinct geological layer found at over 50 different sites spread across 4 continents. This Younger Dryas boundary layer contains incredibly rare nanodiamonds, materials that can only form under the extreme temperatures and pressures consistent with a cosmic impact. It also contains microscopic spherules, tiny glass beads created when rock instantaneously melts and then resolidifies rapidly in mid-air. Furthermore, the layer exhibits elevated concentrations of iridium and platinum, elements that are exceedingly rare on Earth's surface but common within extraterrestrial objects. And at several North American sites, this boundary layer crucially contains a carbon-rich black matte sediment, evidence consistent with continent-wide wildfires that would have raged in the aftermath. The climate data from this period is stark and unambiguous. Greenland ice cores reveal that temperatures in the North Atlantic region plummeted by approximately 7 degrees Celsius within a mere few decades. The warming interglacial period, which had been steadily melting glaciers, reversed almost overnight. Vast ice sheets that had been retreating now stabilized and in many areas began to advance once more. The global warming trend that should have naturally continued for thousands of years just abruptly stopped, as if someone had instantly flipped a cosmic switch. What makes the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis particularly unsettling is precisely everything that vanished during this same period. The Clovis culture, one of North America's earliest well-documented human populations, completely disappears from the archaeological record exactly at the Younger Dryas boundary. Their distinctively fluted spear points, once found across the entire continent in ancient sediment layers, simply stop appearing. Simultaneously, North America bore witness to a large-scale megafaunal extinction of truly staggering proportions. Mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats, giant ground sloths, American camels, and American horses, along with dire wolves and dozens of other species that had successfully survived multiple ice ages, all vanished within an incredibly narrow time frame. In total, approximately 35 genera of large mammals went extinct across the Americas, either during or immediately following the Younger Dryas onset. The impact hypothesis itself remains fiercely debated. Critics argue that the nanodiamonds could have alternate sources, that human overhunting caused the extinctions, or that meltwater disruption of ocean currents rather than a cosmic impact triggered the climate reversal. Yet the sheer coincidence is astounding. At precisely 12,800 years ago, temperatures plummeted, continent-wide wildfires erupted, a sophisticated human culture vanished, and dozens of megafaunal species simultaneously went extinct. Whether the ultimate cause was a comet, meltwater, or something else entirely, the reality of the event itself is undeniable. A world was ending. If a cosmic impact truly triggered the Younger Dryas, it means that about 12,800 years ago, the trajectory of human civilization was fundamentally altered by a single object from space. The Clovis people who had successfully colonized an entire continent were simply erased. Whatever civilizations might have emerged from their expansion across the Americas never materialized. The survivors were forced to start over in a world that had reverted to brutal Ice Age conditions, surrounded by the bones of species that would never again walk the Earth. Next, consider the 4.2 kilo-year event, the devastating drought that effectively killed the Bronze Age. In 1993, geologist Harvey Weiss at Yale University published a groundbreaking paper in Science that connected a single profound climatic event to the simultaneous collapse of multiple civilizations across 3 continents. His excavations at Tel Leilan in northeastern Syria had uncovered something troubling. A thriving urban center, a vital part of the Akkadian Empire, the world's first true empire, had been abruptly abandoned around 2200 BC. The soil layers told a stark story. Beneath the abandonment horizon lay the remains of a prosperous city, but above it, centuries of wind-blown dust and sand. There was no evidence of destruction by war, no signs of plague. The inhabitants simply left, and the desert moved in. What Weiss proposed was truly radical. The Akkadian Empire, founded by Sargon of Akkad around 2334 BC and stretching from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean, didn't fall to invasion or internal revolt. It was utterly destroyed by drought. A severe aridification event, commencing around 2200 BC, transformed the fertile agricultural heartland of northern Mesopotamia into dust. The cities that relied on rain-fed agriculture could no longer produce food. Populations fled southward toward irrigated lands along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, creating refugee crises that completely overwhelmed the remaining infrastructure. The empire fragmented. Within mere decades, the most powerful political entity the world had ever seen simply ceased to exist. But the Akkadian collapse was only one piece of this global catastrophe. the 4.2 kilo-year event left its signature across the entire planet. Marine sediment cores from the Gulf of Oman, analyzed by Peter Domenical at Columbia University, show a dramatic spike in wind-blown dust precisely during this period. Speleothem records from caves in Israel, China, and Italy confirm a sharp, widespread reduction in rainfall spanning several centuries. Something profoundly disrupted global precipitation patterns on a scale that impacted civilizations separated by thousands of kilometers. In Egypt, during this specific time, the Old Kingdom collapsed. The pharaohs, who had commanded an unbroken central authority for nearly 1,000 years and famously masterminded the construction of the Great Pyramids of Giza, swiftly lost their iron grip. The lifeblood of Egyptian agriculture, the Nile's dependable annual floods, catastrophically dwindled. A provincial governor named Antipi, a direct witness to this unraveling, carved desperate inscriptions detailing a land where the entire south was dying of hunger. The once mighty Old Kingdom splintered into warring provincial factions during what became known as the First Intermediate Period, a relentless century of chaos that Egyptians would forever recall as a dark age for millennia to come. At the very same time, a staggering 4,000 kilometers to the east, the sprawling Indus Valley civilization also began its terminal decline. The magnificent metropolises of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, vibrant homes to an estimated 5 million souls across the Indus Plain, withered. The vital Ghaggar-Hakra river system faltered as crucial monsoon patterns inexplicably shifted. Urban centers emptied. The sophisticated infrastructure, precise standardized weights, and vast trade networks that had been the defining hallmarks of this civilization for 700 years simply dissolved. Within 2 short centuries, the very memory of these cities was abandoned to the dust. One of humanity's 3 great cradles of civilization simply vanished. Meanwhile, in China, ancient historical records paint a vivid picture of the Great Flood of Gunyu, a period of cataclysmic environmental instability that precisely aligned with this 200-year event. While the Chinese endured devastating floods rather than crippling drought, the root cause remained the same: a profound disruption of global atmospheric circulation patterns that unleashed devastating consequences, regardless of how those consequences manifested locally. But what truly elevates the 4.2 kilo-year event into the most terrifying entry on this historical list isn't merely its staggering body count. Though the death toll was indeed immense, it's the chilling pattern it unveils, a singular sweeping climatic shift that simultaneously annihilated civilizations utterly unaware of each other's existence. The Akkadians knew nothing of the Egyptians' suffering. The Egyptians had no concept of the Indus Valley's collapse. Each civilization experienced its own calamitous destruction as an incomprehensible, localized disaster. None grasped that the identical, invisible force was simultaneously dismantling human achievement across the entire world. This 4.2 kilo-year event wasn't a fleeting bad season or a difficult decade. It was a relentless siege lasting some 200 to 300 years. Centuries of ever-diminishing rainfall, crop failures that stacked year upon year, and the inexorable collapse of social order. Civilizations meticulously built over 1,000 years were erased in the span of mere generations. This event was so profoundly significant that, in 2018, the International Commission on Stratigraphy formally designated it as the boundary marker for our current geological age, the Megalaean. This means the collapse of these Bronze Age civilizations isn't just a historical footnote, it is a defining characteristic of the very era we still inhabit. The drought eventually ended. Civilizations, against all odds, eventually rebuilt. Yet, the 4.2 kilo-year event stands as a grim testament. Earth's climate utterly refuses to negotiate with human ambition. It doesn't care how sophisticated your irrigation systems become, nor how permanent your grand monuments appear. A shift in atmospheric circulation, lasting a mere few centuries, was all it took to simultaneously wipe out the most advanced civilizations on 3 continents. And the precise mechanisms that triggered this catastrophe could activate once more, for reasons we might not even recognize until the damage is already tragically irreversible.